Well, good morning, LinkedIn. My name is Joel Bennett, and I'd like to welcome you to this episode of Practical Leadership, an opportunity for you to learn more about how to be an effective leader and build leadership habits in your daily work. If you are tuning in live, please say hello in the comments. Tell us where you're tuning in from. As Shawn will attest to, it's more fun if we know people are out there. And over the last couple of weeks, you guys have done a nice job of jumping in, introducing yourself, and even connecting with each other. If you joined us last time for Building Leadership Habits with Chris Taylor, I'd love it if you could do me a favor and just share what you've been practicing to improve your own leadership. Feel free to share your successes if you've had some, or even some of the challenges you run up to this point with. And I'm happy to jump into the chat after our session to maybe give you a boost or to encourage you along the way. So I see we've already got a few people in the comments. Let's see who we've got today. Welcome, Kyle. Good to see you. Somebody just right down the street from me. Sarah, welcome. Sarah, I see your question about the Zoom address. Hopefully by now you recognize that we're going live right here, so you should be good. Kelly, also from Pella. And thanks for posting. I'm glad you're working on empathy. That's an important skill. Something to practice with our teams. Jen, welcome from North Carolina. Scott from Pella. Tyler from Des Moines. We've already got a pretty good group coming in. Keep dropping that in as we go. Love to see that as we continue. So if you haven't tuned in before, during these sessions, we try to tackle real leadership challenges, topics that are of interest to you, and encourage you to actually apply what you're learning. And do that in such a way that you understand practical steps to weave into your daily leadership practices or the team culture you're trying to create. So I've asked leadership experts from around the world to join me to provide their own perspectives, their experiences, both in their daily life and the way that they lead others. So today I'm excited to be joined by Shawn Shepheard, who's an executive coach and an accomplished speaker from Toronto, Canada. And I've known Shawn for a number of years. And believe me, if you didn't get a chance to get your cup of coffee this morning, Shawn's going to serve as your shot of caffeine to get started today. So thanks for joining me, Shawn. It's great to see you again.
Well, hey, you're most welcome, and yeah, we're gonna have some fun. And I love it. Reminds me of the TV show here in Canada, Romper Room, when I always be in front of the TV, like I hope they call my name. But hey, Megan, hey, Tyler, hey, Scott, I love it. So thanks for having me, man.
Perfect. Well, today our topic is going to be about what peak performers do differently, and I think this topic is actually applicable to anyone listening today, whether you're a leader or just a team member. You have your own business. I think it's important for us to understand how we can take it up a notch. And so I'm excited to get Shawn's thoughts on that. But before we get started, I just want to reinforce for you that we'd love for you to be active in the chat and share your own perspectives, experiences. If you've got questions as we go, we'd love to get to as many of those as we can. If you're watching this as a recording, you're not off the hook. I'd love to hear from you as well. So be active in the chat. And once our session's done today, I'm happy to respond to any questions or thoughts that you have. So we've had a few more people come in, but we are going to go ahead and get started. So Shawn, on this topic of peak performance, before we really dig into some of the things that we can both share from this perspective, I think it would be helpful to level set the audience today on, what do we mean by the phrase peak performance? So how would you define it?
So I would say peak performance to me is what people that are playing at the highest level, like the top 4 or 5% of people, are doing differently. So it doesn't matter if you are a manager, a business owner, an athlete. There's things that people do that play at the highest level differently. And the clients that I work with are family-owned business owners that have had tremendous amount of growth in their company long before they ever met me. And the truth is, what got them to that level is not going to get them to the next level. So I help them get to the next level without working 24/7. And to do that, they need to start doing things differently. Doing everything themselves actually gets in the way. And, in the words of Marshall Goldsmith, what got you here won't get you there. Peak performers focus on the things that matter, that move them closer to their goals, and they do things differently.
I really love the way that you framed that around what got you here won't get you where you want to be next. That's probably a struggle, not just for business owners, but also, I work with a lot of new leaders. I work with leaders who maybe have some experience, but are developing over time or trying to develop other skill sets. And I think there is this common misperception that once I have a process, that I just have to stick to that process. And that is good in some parts of our life, but things can get stale. We can fall into ruts and routines, and the world's always changing around us, as we've seen over the last couple of years. So what our team may need from us, or what we need from ourselves to kind of reach that next level, always needs to be changing. So as you work with your coaching clients, and I know you have a number of coaching clients across the US and Canada, what do you feel like they need to have in place to be successful in this arena?
Okay, so there's three things that I want to start, and it's kind of like the hot sauce on top of everything we're going to talk about today. There are three things that peak performers need and absolutely need to play at the highest level. And I don't care if you think of sport, if you think of your favorite Broadway star, if you think of your favorite business owner or manager, it applies to all of them. So three things that they absolutely need. Number one is they need coaching and accountability. So, hey, no surprise, a coach puts coaching first. But you think of anybody that's playing at the highest level, I guarantee they have coaching. I guarantee they have mentors. I was watching the football games probably, I don't know if you were, probably on Sunday afternoon. And every one of those athletes has so many coaches on the field and also behind the scenes. So coaching and accountability. My coaching clients, often when they're at the top, the owner, who are they accountable to? So number one is they need coaching and accountability, somebody to kind of keep them on track. Number two is they need a community, a supportive community. So a community of other business owners, other people that get it. I know as entrepreneurs, like often in social settings or family settings, we're the odd one. We're the one that started a company and nobody can relate. So community. I think of my good friend and your good friend, Jim Kaludis in the Boston area. He's part of a peer group. National Painting Peer Group. He's part of Strategic Coach. He's part of EEO. He's part of a number of communities, not just in his industry, which is a key part, but other industries as well. So number two is they need to be part of a community. And number three is they need the tools to execute. Here we're now February 1st. A lot of companies, there's been a lot of flip chart paper. Man, if you buy stock in flip chart companies in January, because people do a lot of strategic planning, which is great, but I work on how do you execute that? What are you doing the day after the strategic plan? Are you working on the right things at the right time? So number three is they need the tools to execute and bring that strategic plan to place. So it's coaching, accountability, community, and the tools to work on the right things at the right time.
Shawn, what I was struck by as you're going through those three is two of the three are all about people, right? And I think it's important, point that you have there about, sometimes that coach is going to be a professional coach, right? Other times it is just a mentor. It could be somebody that you want to learn from, somebody that gives you wise counsel or just honest feedback. And I'll tell you, I don't think leaders do that enough. And especially business owners, it can be really lonely at the top.
Yeah.
And so sometimes you do have to turn to people outside the organization. Again, whether that's a professional coach, somebody else in your industry. And that's where I think those community pieces can be really important too, is we talk about change and being able to take it to the next level. Sometimes the things that we need are not things we're ever going to think of on our own. And so being able to bump into people in our industry or even outside our industry to get cool new ideas, or maybe to kind of sharpen the way that we look at our business or the way that we look at leading our teams can be super critical.
So I'll say we are an example of that, Joel, because at the beginning of the pandemic, I lost almost 90% of my income overnight because it used to be in the room and live, and everything shut down. And I can say now that, oh, things are great and the business is great, and it is, and I'm very grateful for that. But I was in full on panic zone. And I will tell you, you were a big part of helping me in those darkest days because we couldn't even leave our houses. And you, my friend, and 3 other of our colleagues, and I give a big shout out to your guest last week, Chris Taylor, because he's the crazy connect that brought us all together. We met almost weekly from around the world, and I'm so grateful I had that community that we could have those real conversations with each other. I don't know where I would have been without it.
Oh, and in some ways that's been one of the positives to COVID, right? Is the stuff that we would have never thought of doing before, jumping on a Zoom call with somebody from Australia or the UK or Mexico or wherever else, to kick around ideas or even to collaborate on projects, that became commonplace in COVID. It's funny, and I think for me at least, there's been a positive, I'll use the word hangover from that, right? It's now when I want to jump on a call with somebody, I go straight to Zoom. And not because I own stock in Zoom, but more because it's great to be able to see people face to face. And I find there's a lot of value from being able to not just communicate, but to collaborate in that. And so, whether you are an individual contributor, you're knocking it out of the park in the role that you have there, or you're a leader of a team, don't underestimate the power of the people in that equation. And your third part around process, having the tools that are necessary to get it done, to me, those only work if I have the first two.
Yeah,
because I won't know exactly what I need as far as tools unless I've got that other perspective. Yeah. So I know that you work in your coaching practice with a lot of peak performers on a regular basis, or those that are trying to move toward peak performance. What would you say are maybe the top 3 things that they do differently than what we'd call an average performer?
Okay. So number 1 is they own their schedule. They own their schedule. So I remember pre-COVID, now it's all like pre or post or wherever we're in right now. I don't know what we're in, but I remember doing a keynote for a company. They had all the staff there. It's about 220, 30 people. And I started it with how many people, when you wake up in the morning, the first thing you do is reach for your phone. And 90% sheepishly put their hands up. Before they kiss their husband or wife or dog or whatever, I can think of like 10 other things to do that are better than that. So before they get out of bed in the morning, they've already lost control of the day. They're still in bed and they're dealing with everybody else's stuff. That's not what peak performers do. Peak performers put what's important in their schedule every day, and they drive the bus to the schedule. They let their schedule run the day and not everybody else. If we don't get really good at doing that, then everybody else's problem is going to take us away. When I start working with clients, this is the number 1 thing. Like most of them are, I can't even talk to them without them checking their phone. And I have them hand in their phone when we do group sessions. And, some people almost like they're in a panic attack, right? So it's like, focus on what matters and block it into your schedule and say no to the distraction. Focus on what matters and say no to the distraction. Professional athletes let their calendar run the day. Peak performers put what's important and let their calendar run the day and not everybody else. I'll say this very quickly because I did this maybe 2 months ago and people go, "What are you like? Are you an alien?" I took email off my phone.
Wow.
And you're like, wow, like, what are you, crazy? And I'm like, well, My whole business is to focus on what matters and avoid distractions. I check my email twice a day, and that's still pretty. You're still going to get a response within 24 hours. So the number one thing is they run the day and not everybody else. That's the number one thing they do differently. Number two, I get so excited about this stuff. Number two is they have the courage to say, I don't know. I don't know. I don't know all the answers. I need help. In my previous life, I used to work corporately, and I didn't honestly meet a lot of CEOs that said that to me or said that publicly. I don't know. They have the courage to know what they don't know and ask for help. These ridiculously successful business owners constantly say, Shawn, can you help me with this? I don't know what I'm doing. And so they have the courage to say those words, I don't know, and ask for help. That's, if we know everything, then there's no room for improvement. And I love the quote about the beginner's mind. In the expert's mind, there's no possibilities. In the beginner's mind, everything's a possibility. Right. So they have the courage to say, I don't know. We all have blind spots, every single one of us. One of the biggest lessons for me in the last 5 years is I was in strategic coach. I started that in 2016, and they call it unique ability. Gay Hendricks calls it zone of genius. And they had us track all of our activities for 2 weeks. It was such a painful exercise. And at that point, I identified I was investing about 18% of my time in my unique abilities. It's the things that I think I do exceptionally well that give me energy. Things you do exceptionally well and give me energy. Now I look at it, it's about 80%.
Wow.
But I had to actually say no and clear a lot and ask for help because I didn't know how to go from 18 to 30%, let alone. So that's number two. Number three is they have feedback loops. And I'm not talking about the annual review or the quarterly review. I'm talking about a weekly review. So yes, I love sports, and whatever, pick your sport. I know we've got people from Australia and from Canada and from the United States. So I'm Canadian, so you can probably guess that hockey is my favorite. So hockey players, but it doesn't matter what sport. You look at them during the game, they are looking at the play they just did, the quarterback on the sidelines, the hockey player on the bench, and they're making adjustments continually. They're looking at what they did well and not. Feedback loops are critical to success. All of my clients on Friday afternoon, I call it review the game film. They answer 3 questions. What are my 3 wins from this week? Because even in the worst weeks, there's wins. Let's focus on that, right? What are the challenges? Because even in the best weeks, there's challenges. And then what's one thing, not 10, that you're going to commit to doing differently next week? They need to have those weekly, if not daily, feedback loops. I'm a bit, crazy obsessed with this, so I do daily feedback loops. So the 3 things, they run their day, their schedule, they drive the bus, they have the courage to ask for help and say, I don't know. And number 3, there's built-in feedback loops and continuous improvement.
Yeah.
I'm just going to have a sip of water. I get excited, man.
Yeah, I don't want you to get dehydrated. A couple things. One, I want to give you kudos. It's been a number of months ago, but you suggested a tool on kind of time blocking for me, which I do a pretty good job of dropping things into my calendar, but just like anybody else, I may say, here's what I'm going to work on, and then things kind of slide one way or the other and I miss it. But you provided me kind of a recommendation for a website called FocusMate. And for those watching today, we're getting no money for plugging FocusMate.
But maybe we should call them and get it.
I was going to say, FocusMate, if you're out there, we will take sponsorships. But FocusMate is a great opportunity. You essentially go on there, you block in a piece of time, and they match you with a stranger. And essentially, it's like a Zoom call, but at the beginning of the Zoom call, you say, hey, here's what I'm going to work on today. What are you going to work on today? You set your goal. you mute your microphones, and you work for, depending on the time period, 20 minutes, 50 minutes. And at the end of it, you say, here's what I got accomplished. And so for a lot of us, just holding ourselves accountable to the time blocks we have is tough. Might be something to check on FocusMate. The other piece I'm going to give you kudos on, and this is coaching you gave me way back, probably 2018, was that thought process of around kind of reviewing the game tape. And I think that can look different for different people. Sometimes it literally is sitting back and going, here's what I said I was going to get done today, here's what I actually got done today, or here's what I was hoping how this conversation was going to go, but here's how it actually went. But for many of us, and this is something I've begun to do probably over the last couple of years, I've gotten really good at it, is just sitting down daily and capturing some notes in a journal. And I don't mean like the Dear Diary kind of journal. I mean more, hey, here was the focus of my day. Here's how I think it went. Here's how maybe I need to double down tomorrow, or what I need to change for tomorrow. I think that's been really helpful for me, both in managing my business, but also in the way that I show up for my clients, my family. And so if that's not a practice that people are using, kind of that mindfulness and reviewing the game tape, whether it is by journaling or just, a quick kind of to-do list, pros and cons to how I did my day, I think that can be really powerful.
Yeah. So I two things to say to that. And again, I teach what I needed to do first, right? Like when I was all over the map before, right? I was all over the map. So I needed some guardrails. So number one, my executive assistant, every Tuesday, I give her 12 questions that she asks me, and I give myself a score of 1 to 10. And the last question is, what's one thing I'm going to do differently? And I also have my 3 wins. So 10, 12 questions, 3 wins. This morning, she just sent me my January report. It is Tom Brady-like detail. I feel like, oh my God, look at this report. So then the thing is, even when I look at it, I'm like, oh my God, only 3 weeks ago, I forgot about those wins. Oh, and then I see the adjustments along the way. We've been doing that now for 9 months. It's made a world of difference. And then I can track. Not every week is going to be great. I also put in there my health and nutrition and water and walking and all the things that are important to me. And then I look at it and go, okay, well, I need to make some adjustments. Oh. So that one, like, oh my God, these reports, we can do them. You don't have to hire people. Just write down the questions. Number 2, FocusMate. It's my secret weapon. So I only do 25-minute Pomodoros. Chris Taylor was the first one to introduce me to Pomodoros many, many years ago. Chris, I heard you, just took me 7 years to get the lesson. So I just block out in my calendar, like for next week, I'll block out times where it's just, I call it focus time. So you might not even have to give it a job yet. But then I have those and I'm like, okay, I got 6 of these 25-minute blocks, and then I give it a job to do. I could give it a job to do next week. When I go on FocusMate, I've met people from around the world. There was one of my FocusMates from last week. She had done over 4,900 sessions.
Yeah, that's crazy.
And at the end, she said, everybody goes, what do you do differently? Between me and you, and she was a professor, I teach, I go to meetings, and I do FocusMate sessions. That's all I do.
That's great.
I don't know. Keep it simple.
Yeah, keep it simple. So let's talk about keeping it simple, Shawn. So that the whole point of these sessions are to keep things practical and to figure out ways to start with small steps that move us in the right direction. And so as we think about this topic of peak performance, what do you feel like is one simple step that you'd suggest those watching today put into practice, even yet this week, maybe even yet this day?
I would say get clear on defining what success looks like on Friday, on Monday, and be really specific. So maybe it's making 3 calls. Like one of my favorite things that I've worked with a couple of sales reps that they love this is I said, make a call a day to a happy customer. What else? That's it. Make a call a day to a happy. And then like 3 weeks later, like, oh my God, you're a genius in sales and blah, 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 blah. So get really clear on what success looks like for this week and get it really, really micro, and then review it on Friday. Do those two things. Get clear on what success looks like every week. And I have people around me that, not only my assistant, that ask me those questions, but I review this all the time. I ask those questions. I hang out in other communities that's the language we talk every Monday. What does success look like on Friday afternoon? And then put it through the feedback loops. If you just do those two things, I guarantee that you will see some pretty big progress.
Wow. All right. Well, so as I've said before, LinkedIn gets used in a lot of different ways by a lot of different people. But today I really want it to be really a catalyst for action for those watching. And for some of you, the accountability that Shawn just talked about. So you invested the time and energy to be here today. And more specifically, to learn more about being a peak performer. But as I always say, that investment's going to be completely wasted if you don't actually do something with it. Being all talk or all knowledge and no action is a problem. So with that in mind, I want you to identify that one thing that you commit to doing over the next 7 days that's going to take your leadership to the next level. It could be what Shawn shared, but for many of you, you've already identified that one tweak that you need to make. Maybe it's not checking your phone first thing in the morning. Maybe it's take an email off, any of those types of things. But what's the one thing you're actually going to commit to doing for the next 7 days to see where you can take your leadership next? And so once you have that, go ahead and drop that in the comments. And when we get together for next week's session, you can share how things went and the successes or challenges that you've had along the way. So take 15 seconds now, capture your thoughts, drop them in the comments. And while you're doing that, I want to thank you, Shawn, for joining me today. It's always fun speaking to you. We have a lot of laughs. I'm even from this topic, even though we've talked about it before, I'm motivated to apply some of these new thoughts, new techniques for myself. So if you want to get a hold of Shawn and hear more about his work, I'd encourage you to reach out to him on LinkedIn. Follow his weekly posts. He also has a fantastic LinkedIn Live series that he hosts every Monday morning. It's a great way to start your week and maybe a good reminder to do that Monday kind of planning session on what success is going to look like for you. So reach out to Shawn if you'd like to hear more about his work or ways that you can get plugged in to the resources he offers to leaders like you. So with that brings us to next week. I'm excited to announce that Christy Mertens, who's the founder of Invisible Disciplines in Toronto, Canada, is going to be joining me to explore the topic of active listening and why it's the secret sauce to collaboration in our teams and in our organizations. So keep your eyes out for that LinkedIn event posting, or drop me a note in the chat and ask me to personally invite you. You're not going to want to miss this one. Christy's going to be a fantastic resource on this topic. And again, I want to encourage you to take something that you heard from today and put it into practice. As soon as today, you can take one small step today so you can become the leader that your team needs. And if you found this useful, please join us again next week. If you're willing, invite a friend who you might think could benefit from it. If you've stumbled across this video and we're not connected on LinkedIn, please send me a request, mention the show, and we'll remedy that. But regardless, I want to thank you again for joining Shawn and I hope to see you next week. Blessings.